So last time on our tractor, we designed and fabricated a linear actuator power steering, and we could not fully test it because the steering column is locked up and basically shot. This time around, we got to replace the steering column, and then we got to fully test this linear actuator steering system and see what happens. See how well it works, see if it works, that kind of thing. So let's get into it. So this is where we're at. This, just turning the wheel like this, it's loose. There's giant dead spots. Basically this whole column is messed up and I either need to rebuild it or replace it. So I have this column that I salvaged from our parts tractor. I need to take a look at this and evaluate it. I'm not sure that I ever looked at it real close. I just basically took it off and it's been sitting here since because I didn't know if I was going to use it or not. But I think now we maybe just clean it up and use it if it's easier. Anyway, first thing I'm going to do is look at this column and then get that old column out of there, and I don't know, see where we're at. See if I have to mix and match parts, rebuild anything, refill this with oil. I don't know. Let's take a look. Alright, steering wheel is out. I noticed a difference on the newer versus older tractors. The older tractors don't have this subdivision here. They just have, like, it's enclosed on the sides, and then this plate isn't here, but it's empty in the middle and can catch water, like on my parts tractor that was from the 80s. This one, they must have made a subtle redesign so that it can't really hold water in there and rust out the top of that case. Just interesting little design features. Alright, I got that out. Let's take a look at the columns we have here. I have the old and the new. And this thing, even completely out like this, is just so crunchy. So in this retrospect, they seem to have made the columns a little lower quality in later years, because this one has a grease zerk fitting here. This one has nothing, and we are going to make sure that this one has whatever oil in it that it's supposed to have. We'll look that up in the book and fill it up. But this one, no dead spots, and it runs smoothly. So I think what we're going to do is just clean this one up and put it right in. I'll probably take this box off to maybe be used or mounted at a later date. I guess these are turn signals and lights and stuff and horn, and so they didn't have to mount them on the dash. It's not a bad system. Okay, well, it's been sitting in the dirt. I should not have let it sit in the dirt. Oh, what's this? Oh, well, no wonder. Yeah, it's going to be empty of oil because the whole case is cracked. I did not see that. That's probably why all the oil ran out. You put all the oil in that you want, it's never going to have enough. Alright, I guess that one for sure is junk. I was hoping maybe some part of this case would be rebuildable or salvageable, but I don't think it is. I mean, even the steering wheel is bent, and probably the only thing is like this shaft, which isn't worth anything anyway, I don't think, because you can probably buy this whole new column relatively cheap because they used it in so much stuff. I'll have to remember to tighten this up. I had loosened this because I wasn't sure which way I was going to take it off on the parts tractor. Alright, so we'll clean this up and see what we got. Make sure this case isn't cracked. And I see that there's water running out of here. Yep, it's water. So water got down in there, and that would explain that problem. Alright, she's all back together. Not too bad. I did grease the... Oh, I left a big wad of grease up there. I did grease that upper bushing there, so... hopefully she'll work. I don't know. Let's try it, basically. That's all there is for it. Works pretty good. So, preliminary results, the steering is a little numb. And what I mean by that is when you turn the wheel, there's kind of a spot in the middle where the wheel freewheels before it hits the switches. And when it hits the switches, there's not that positive engagement that you feel because the electric steering picks up really fast. And you can kind of feel when it picks up a little bit if you're waiting for it. But if you're going from a normal manual steering wheel that has a direct correlation to turning this even a little bit and getting a result out of the wheels, it's not the same. It takes a little bit of getting used to. Once you get used to it, it works just fine. But you have to... you know, it's a different feel, basically. I hear a lot of car reviewers, when electric steering in cars first came out, they described it as numb because there wasn't a lot of feedback in the wheel. Like, you know, you would push against the wheel and it wouldn't necessarily push back according to, you know, what the road did. And that's kind of how I would describe this, because this electric actuator takes out a lot of the feedback from the wheel itself, because there's no direct connection between the actual steering bar and the steering wheel other than when you're at the direct lock and it's against the switch. You know, then you're directly engaged. But the problem with that is you don't really feel the difference very much. So from that regard, it does take some getting used to. So in total, how does it drive? Well, the main drawback of this system is it's not a graduated system. Like, you know, normally they have it designed, especially in, you know, like hydraulics. The harder you turn the wheel or the faster you turn the wheel, the faster it responds. This has one speed. You know, it's either on or off. That's it. There's nothing in between. You can graduate the speed of a linear actuator by using a motor controller. And all that basically does is lower the voltage. The max speed you can go is like, you know, 12, 13 volts. And then as you lower it from there, it slows down. So the way to fix this would be to get both a controller and a linear actuator such that the linear actuator was made for faster than this, and ideally more power. But the problem is the faster you go, the less power they have usually. But you can get some that are fast and powerful. They just cost more money. So in an ideal world, you would get that linear actuator and you would hook it up with the motor controller such that the harder you turn the wheel, the more voltage is applied to the linear actuator. You would need another set of sensors on here to determine where it was at. I don't know how you do that, but, you know, cheaply. There's some ways to do it, you know, off the top of my head. You know, you could use a series of switches, and each switch is a different step. You know, it hits the first switch and that's a couple volts, and it hits the next switch and that adds a couple more volts, and so on in each direction. That would be the most simplest way to do it, but it can be done. It would add cost. I'm not going to do it here because I don't need a horrendously fast response. This response is fast enough for me for going around doing slow work like I do. And when you're at, you know, high speed, I have tested it at some of the higher gears, the response is fast enough. You don't need a horrendously fast response at top speed either. Because like I said before, I'm not doing row farming where you need a quick, fast turnaround, you know, 180 degrees at the end of a crop row or something. So that's not an issue for me. Anyway, in addition to the numb steering response that I mentioned, one more thing that makes it a little difficult is when you have this, when you're using the steering wheel, when you're actually, you know, in contact with the steering wheel and you're making a turn, just holding the steering wheel, usually it'll go beyond where you have it set, because if you hold the steering wheel, then this will keep extending until it's off the limit switch and then stop. So it's a delayed response. So when you reach your turning point and want it to stop right there rather than going past a little bit, you need to actually back off the steering wheel a little bit, just a hair, as you reach that point to stop it instantly, because otherwise it'll keep going until it's off the limit switch. That you can fix by just getting used to driving a little differently. Just takes some getting used to. It is a disadvantage because it's not, you know, standard procedure, but once you get used to it, it's pretty much second nature. Another thing, it would be nice for like when you're backing up, again, because you need slow, fine adjustments. It's kind of hard to tell where your steering is at. Like if you're holding your wheel, are you still on the limit switch and it's going to go a little bit further? Things like that, because you don't have a solid feel other than, you know, because as soon as you hit the limit switch, it's moving. You know, you don't actually feel it hit the stop, and then it starts to move. So from that regard, you can't really tell where you're at. It'd be nice to have a series of lights or buzzers. Buzzers might get annoying, but it'd be nice to have like lights that would tell you when a limit switch is engaged, so that you would know the second that you back off of it. And I might make that modification. Again, it's a cheap way of doing it, but it just, you know, it add a little bit of driving aid to when you're operating it to kind of tell, you know, exactly the moment when it stops steering. So those are disadvantages. Basically, they all boil down to steering feel. Everything else can be corrected for, the speed and everything. You just gotta pour more money into it, basically. But it works for my purposes. It does work, and it is fast enough. I would not want to use this on like a field tractor where you're going down rows and you have to turn around tight at the end and swing back again, because you would have to kick down the low gear to spin around faster, because you'd have more time to turn. If you're turning in high gear, you're going to do a long, slow, lazy turn, basically. And for a lot of road tractors, that's not gonna quite do it unless you swing out one way and come back, and well, you know what I'm talking about if you do a lot of row farming. But I don't do that. This tractor's a workhorse for towing and moving and transporting things and lifting and doing all that stuff. It's not a farm tractor running implements kind of thing at the moment. So I don't need to turn tremendously fast. This actuator is rated for, I think, 14 millimeters per second, but when I actually measure it, it's more like 13-ish. And of course, under load, that slows down a good bit. The most important benefit of this is that it is dirt cheap. The other thing I spent is my time and a few materials. I just got these limit switches off of, I don't know, eBay or Amazon. I got like a whole pack of them for really cheap. Linear actuator was like 80 bucks, which just shows you how cheap it is. And if it breaks, you can easily put another one in between those brackets. And of course, you know, linear actuators are everywhere these days. So, you know, even if it broke a couple times here or wore out a couple times, then that's still cheap enough to put a good many units in there before you go to a full-on hydraulic system. But it doesn't have the full advantages of a hydraulic system, which is the raw power and speed to whip your wheels around, you know, when you're sitting still or in a hurry. This is going to go at its own pace, and there's no rushing it. But the advantage here is if I want to go back to manual steering, all I have to do is disconnect the end of that linear actuator, well, one end or the other, and then that arm is free again. I don't even have to put on the solid arm that I have, even though you could if you wanted to, but you just have a loose spot in the middle as it moves back and forth when you go from side to side. But that's fine. But in a pinch, and especially if this linear actuator breaks, I can easily go back to manual steering if I'm far away from my tools. You just pull a pin and then you're good to go. So that is kind of an advantage for me on the cheap side. If anyone wants like dimensions on these plates or anything that I made, and all the dimensions and materials and everything to do this, I can make a video and a follow-up video and make a list, but I don't see a lot of people wanting to do this the electric fashion just because of the disadvantages and the lack of speed on it. But if you do, hit me up in the comments and I'll make another video. So did it work? Yes. Does it work as well as a hydraulic system? Absolutely not. So yeah, we've got power steering. Is it the best power steering in the world? Absolutely not. Is it the cheapest power steering in the world? Most definitely. And it didn't take as much work as it would to modify the column with an orbital valve or any of the hydraulics or anything. Didn't have to tap into the hydraulic pump. None of that business. So from my standpoint, that's great because this took me about, I don't know, 2 or 3 days working part-time on it, and now I can actually steer it around the yard again and put it back to work. For me, that's a win. So, as always, I appreciate likes, comments, definitely appreciate subscriptions. It helps keep me motivated and keep doing garbage like this. So, as always, thanks for watching.